I came up the scenic way by writing a 6-book series on video game design, academic books on video game design, where I learned, all that, you know that the scene in The Simpsons.
Nerds, it's okay.
You know the scene in The Simpsons where he says, "Oh, a sarcasm detector. Oh, that's a real good invention," and the sarcasm detector explodes. Well, the nerd alert meter, when I walk near it, just melts into the floor.
Welcome to the JRPG Pursuit, a podcast for all things JRPGs. And today we have a very, very special episode and one of our first interviews, actually, on our podcast here that we are so excited about. But to start with, I'm Emily.
I'm Branden.
I'm Abdallah.
And today we want to introduce 3 special people who work on the upcoming indie game, Quartet. So can you guys please introduce yourselves, a little bit what you do, and a little bit about what Quartet is?
Sure. Is my audio still good? Sorry, I have a screaming 4-year-old in the background. So if I'm talking and anyone hears a screaming 4-year-old, let me say this. Can't stop. 4-year-old. Can't stop.
It's the ambiance,
The ambiance of the,
it's all
exactly.
good. It works to how you guys do like indie developments, right?
No, right. No, yeah.
Exactly.
Home office, and that's part of it. That's part of the whole vibe. I'm Patrick. I'm the director and writer and systems designer of Quartet. I wrote a book series about JRPGs mostly JRPGs to learn how they work, and it's called the Reverse Design Series, and that's usually what I'm known for.
Yeah, I'm Tyler. My 4-year-old is hopefully sleeping now. And I am the composer, producer, and battle designer for Quartet. And happy to talk about that later.
Cool. I'm Peter. I'm the programmer on Quartet. I also have a 4-year-old, and she is downstairs destroying the living room.
I think so.
The weird thing was they were all born on the same day, which is no.
They're actually forming an ancient JRPG
not having
party.
A 4-year-old, but okay.
Yeah. It was actually Second Impact happened, and then they were all born immediately after that.
So tell us a little bit about Quartet. Just give us the elevator pitch.
Sure, it's Final Fantasy VI for people with dwindling 401ks and mortgage payments and screaming 4-year-olds. It's Final Fantasy VI for grown-ups, not in the way that it's like loot or anything, but just like if you played Final Fantasy VI, 30 years ago, that burned my mouth to say how long ago that was. But if you did that, or any time really in the past 20 something years, then the person you are now is the person we were aiming at.
Yeah. Okay. Growing up with that genre and trying to support, this demographic who wants to see our JRPGs grow up with us.
Yeah, that's the idea. We'll see.
And I think that that is super appealing to me. And I think for a lot of people, just because we, when we love something as a kid, as we grow up, we kind of want that thing to grow up with us. And most series, I don't know about most, but a lot of series don't. They kind of stay where they are. You think Pokemon, for example. Pokemon is still targeting the same age demographic. That hasn't broadened. And it's, to me, it's really appealing, the idea of taking this thing that was so meaningful to me and kind of aging it up with me. So how much of that was a conscious decision, and how much of it was just kind of an outgrowth of the fact that you are who you are and this is what you made?
It's probably a little bit of both. When we decided the higher end vision of the game, we definitely had sort of that at least general era of JRPG design style in mind. Pat had mentioned he wrote those books, so we had a lot of good data on people say, oh, we're going to do a love letter to the Chrono Trigger, but do they have that sort of granular knowledge on how the battles are paced or how the story's paced, how it's structured? And so that definitely helped. Yeah, and just a combination of that knowledge, liking those games. And then also, I maybe I'll speak for myself. Peter in our team is probably the one who's played the most diversity of JRPGs. But when I play more modern games, I quite like a lot of them, but they're definitely very different. They have a lot of different design decisions, especially in the combat. Combats are generally longer. the monsters are tankier because it's forcing you to use more like layered systems on top of each other. Like a lot of games have burst systems, break systems. You could think of a mini in the last decade or two. Generally, like quests are like more MMO style these days, which is cool. Like genre's got to evolve and change, but we definitely wanted to do something that was a little bit more of the old style in terms of just like big picture and then the tiny details. And so hopefully that will be refreshing to people who are like, maybe I don't want a game where I get to the first town and there's 50 NPCs with little blinking lights on them that give me a quest to go find 10 seeds. Like that's a big part of modern design.
Yeah.
It could flesh out the world. It could add content hours. Probably the latter is probably why it's done. It's cheaper to make because you can reuse assets and then it adds time. So we just didn't want to do
familiar
that.
too.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. I'm not a huge Trails fan. Don't come at me. But I will say,
shots fired.
One thing I always really appreciate. I only played the first one. I played about 60 hours of Trails in the Sky, first one. And one thing I actually did like was they found an in-universe way to make the fetch quests feel important. Where like the main character is literally trying to be a bracer, and bracers do odd jobs around town to help people. And I was like, this is like very nice that they actually found a compelling way to make these like menial content grinds, but make it feel relevant to the characters. I mean, I can't tell you how many games I play now where the character, who is a clearly defined character, it's not an avatar, so it's like Cloud in the FF7 remake or whoever. They don't want to do this quest. Cloud would not do this quest, but yet you have to because it's a modern game. So we definitely wanted to steer from that, and we'll see if people like that.
Yeah, brisk pacing was a pillar to the point where Tyler at some points had to tell me to add more, to like, no, let that story point or that cutscene or whatever, or this dungeon go on a little bit longer.
Let it simmer.
Yeah, because like I just ruthlessly pared everything down. Like I usually had a script. I always had a script. I was working from a script, but then I would be like, you know what? There's this extra scene here that I could cut down, and 8 times out of 10 that ended up sticking. But then 2 times out of 10, Tyler would tell me like, no, actually, I think we might be going too brisk here. So brisk pacing was very important, and is hopefully preserved everywhere.
Yeah. So how would you balance that, I guess, with trying to make the world more like lived in? Because I know sometimes they do the side quests as a way to understand more about the environment and what are the people like. But I do appreciate, for the most part, brisk pacing because it can get a little bit long in the,
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, like obviously, people really want to there's a lot of players today who really want to hang out in the vibe of the world. And we're not against that necessarily. I'm a big fan of Skyrim and New Vegas, Fallout New Vegas, which are 2 games that really, you're going to linger. Yeah, that's kind of the whole point. But I really enjoyed it in those games. But we just wanted to do something which we felt was currently being underserved. Not because it was necessarily the better thing, but just because, if everyone else is doing one thing, we're not going to compete with, 24 JRPGs that have millions of dollars when we have, 2% of that. So we wanted to just do something different because that's basically our only shot. And then in terms of like how you balance that with the sort of, balancing like getting a chance to live in the world. There's a few things we did. Like one is just the story moves really fast. So you kind of, if you're absorbed in the story, if you like it, you won't notice. Because you're just like, I'm going to go do the next thing. And you don't even stop to think, I didn't really get to visit this town that much. You just, you're too compelled. That's the goal, at least. But then also we did give, in not every chapter, but many chapters, any chapter where you really hit the world map, we'd like to put in a few optional areas, little things to discover. And there's hidden nooks in every dungeon. And every town is full of, a fairly large number of NPCs who embellish the story. So even though you're not doing quests for them, they do have something to say. There are a few optional scenes. And then of course, the last chapter of the game is 8 story-driven quests for each of the characters. So it's like the world of Ruin, right? You really get to fly around in your airship and really inhabit the world in a way and explore everything that you can. So like a lot of that is just backloaded rather than being absent.
It's very like FF6 coded there, like you said. It's got like that tightly wound first half, and then it's kind of opens up towards the later half and lets you kind of just explore that.
Yeah, that was definitely the goal.
Yeah, and I was like going through towns and looting all the personal belongings of the villagers, and we uphold that fine tradition.
Yes.
Of course. I do like that. Like from what I've seen, there's like a lot of really interesting, it's even like as you're talking to NPCs, there's some ways to like the way the narrative drives some of the conversations with the NPCs, especially if you like, let's say Ben's chapter and stuff like that. And then when he's asking for like odd jobs and stuff, it adds that sense of like, I don't know. It's interesting to see their reactions to him coming back at them. And then like how they've already dealt with him in the past. And just seeing their reactions
reading
to
the history, like letting the audience kind of infer
exactly
the history that exists. Which is so much better than info dumping. Yeah,
exactly. That's a lot of it
camera. Yeah,
on camera.
100%. Right. It's a lot of inferred information and a lot of like just like you have to just take in all of these nuances. And I find that like because like every time you play it, it's going to be like you'll learn something a little bit new or something you didn't catch previously. Yeah. So yeah.
So we want to talk more about your influences, just to kind of help people, I think, get a sense for, the kind of story you're telling, the kind of game you've made that you were interested in making. Obviously, Final Fantasy VI, like you said, is kind of, I would probably guess a chief inspiration on you all. I want to just throw this aside in here because I don't know if there's any other place that I'm going to have to be able to stick this in. But like the first time one of the characters did that double blink thing, I had like a genuine emotional reaction to that. Like I was like, what is happening to me? Why am I getting like all like verklempt over this like sprite making? So my point is obviously like Final Fantasy VI seems like a pretty big influence, but what about from other angles like combat, story, characters? Tell us a little bit more about some of those influences.
Sure. I mean, as far as the story goes, we're trying to do something different. It's not like the story, of course, is not unified at the beginning. You could think of it as like if Final Fantasy VI started with the split scenario where like Sabin and Terra and Locke all split off into their own thing. So that's different, right? Because you have your first time players are probably going to not hit the split scenario until about 3.5 to 5 hours into Final Fantasy VI. And so they get to have that unified action for a while earlier. And, they get a fairly large party with a reserve pretty quickly, right at the Battle of Narsh. So you're like 7 hours in, you have the entire cast. And we're pretty close to that. But, there's some big structural differences in terms of like putting an RPG party together in our game. We definitely took the risk of letting you get to know each character pair a lot more at the risk of not advancing the main plot that much. So far, our feedback's been pretty good about that, right? But, if you were going to compare it to Final Fantasy VI, that's a big departure. So that was our big artistic departure from Final Fantasy VI and trying to tread new ground for ourselves. Although, I mean, obviously Wild Arms 2, I think, did that as well. So, so it's not like, maybe other Wild Arms games did that. I only played 1 and 2. But, it's not something that no one's ever done. But it's certainly not in the context of like something like Final Fantasy VI. It hasn't been done yet, that particular mixture. So that was a big thing. I can let Tyler talk about battles and what he wanted to do.
Yeah, real quick on that, on the splitting the narratives thing. It's interesting because, in a lot of the games that, at least the ones that I've played, where you have that kind of split narrative, choose your character, I'm thinking like Saga Frontier or Live Alive, or there's some other ones I'm blanking
more
on
recently,
right now.
Octopath.
Like Octopath,
yeah, good call, Octopath. And a lot of them feel like the story and the character work sort of takes a back seat. And one thing that I have noticed is that Quartet does not seem to do that. Like the story is still front and center. And so it kind of made me reevaluate a little bit something that I thought I didn't like in these kinds of games, which was that sort of dividing the characters up. It turns out like, no, if there's like a strong story thread running through these separated chapters, it still can be very good. It's not like I just didn't like Saga Frontier, turns out, like, But yeah, Tyler, why don't you tell us a little bit more about like your influences on the battle side of things?
Yeah. So, I think there were like 2 really big picture ideas that we started the development of the combat side. The first was we're going to have a large cast of 8 characters. That was the first like tent pole. And then from there it was, okay, if we're going to have 8 characters, when you finally get all 8 characters, I want to do I always wished in every game, like I had a maximum party that was bigger than the the size in the active party. You know what I mean? If there's 3 people in battle, but you have an 8-person cast, like, it'd be cool if I could always use everyone. So then we were like, well, let's just rip off and steal from FF10 there. And we just completely wholesale took that mechanic of if anyone has a turn, they can swap to anyone in the back row, and without a turn penalty, that new character can get their turn. So that was a big thing. The second thing I think was a departure from FF6 slightly, where by the end of FF6, you know, when you first get every character before you get the Espers, every character sort of has their little niche. You know, Locke's the thief, you know, Shadow's the ninja, Saban is the monk, etc. But by the time you get Espers and everyone can get magic, everyone can kind of do everything by the end. The differences in character classes are not very strong. But we kind of went back and really character classed every character. And I think it was also, that was really important to the balance of the combat, but also it was really important in reflecting who that character is in the story. The way the character is in the combat is very connected to who they are in the story. What's the relationship with magic? What's the relationship with the world where they come from? And so Ben's a great example. Ben's a 35-year-old guy. He's just trying to get a gig because he accidentally harnesses magic for the first time and blows up his restaurant. And so his magic spells are all about luck-based strikes. His spells can crit. He's the only character who can crit a spell. He has a move called Zap Zap, which does multiple strikes, I think from 3 to 5, something like that, but you can't control the target. So little things like that sort of help flesh out, you know, who they are as characters in combat. And then I would say another combat pillar that this is kind of my preference, and, you know, I really strongly into this, and this maybe potentially is a risk because it's definitely outside of what's common these days. As I kind of mentioned it earlier, where let's say modern day turn-based combat, they really want every battle to sort of be an event. So the monsters are more tanky. There's more layered systems. You usually have to have some kind of break burst system. That's been very common in many games, and I quite like it. But for us, we wanted to say, okay, battles, it's not about the individual battle. It's about the 10 battles of this dungeon. How do those help pace the flow of the dungeon, help pace the story? If this dungeon is just a liminal space that you just need to sort of get through, maybe the battles don't need to be so tanky and big. You just kind of get like an attrition flow, right? So that was definitely a goal of mine. And also, I think, you know, when we were kids and played these older games, they felt very difficult because, well, I can only speak for myself. I was really stupid. But they're not very hard games. Chrono Trigger is not a hard game. It's a very simple game, but it's a beloved classic that almost anyone can play and love. I think it has a lot of merit. Whereas, like, as we grew up older and we played more games like Octopath, which really have crunchy combat and very difficult battles. I remember kind of taking a JRPG hiatus, and then one of the first games I played when I came back was Octopath. And I was like, dang, these battles are hard. And then I started playing more modern games. I was like, man, this kind of is the style now, right? Then I played Bravely Default 2, and it was like kind of a similar thing. I was like, wow, this is a very hard battle system. If you're not really maximizing every system, you're just not going to even win a basic battle. But if you go play FF6, you could just auto crossbow your way through the first 3 hours. Now, whether that's good or not, I mean, it's not quite like that in Quartet. It's a little bit harder. But the point being is that those battles weren't the main dish. They were just like flavor to pace out the story, because everything in the design of those games, in my opinion, was to help propel the linear narrative. And so that's what we tried to do with the combat.
Yeah, that makes sense. I really like, I mean, in some of the older games, I feel like you could kind of make your own difficulty in a way, right? Like using the auto crossbow example, I could say, I'm not going to use the auto crossbow. I'm going to like have a harder time with this fight because I want to challenge myself. Whereas games, I think a lot of modern games, especially modern games with the kind of retro aesthetic, do lean in really heavily on the let's make this as grindy as heck and super challenging for everybody to get through, because it increases the, I don't know, perceived value of it. And I like a challenge, but I also am a baby who's bad at video games. So, there's a balance that I feel like, has to be struck. One question I had about the battle system real quick, about the influence. Was there any influence at all from Final Fantasy Mystic Quest superficially? Yes. Okay. Thank you. It's like, that's like the one thing that I love about Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. A lot of people have a lot of strong feelings about that game, but I love the kind of behind the characters combat. And I loved the first thing that made me really connect with that was when you're fighting bosses, and as you damage them, their sprite kind of changes to show. Yeah. And Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, I think, is the only 16-bit game that did that. So I'm glad to hear that
I do appreciate that
I was picking up on that correctly. So
yeah, I do love the usage of like percentages and AP and like the balance of like using special like or magic attacks and like physical attacks as well to build up your AP again. So like it kind of gives like a really cool like tug and war of like how each character kind of plays through the match, and then it's just a lot of fun. It makes you want to use all your attacks in a certain way, and it keeps that strategy and you finding like weaknesses and things like that. It's like it's really fun to figure out like each battle is very catered to like figuring out how that battle is going to play out, and like because there's only so many battles within each dungeon, like you guys have placed them in specific ways from what I've noticed, at least. I don't know if that changes. So it's just really fun. I'm having a lot of fun with that battle system.
Yeah, players are allergic to using items.
Oh, go ahead, Mike. Yeah, sorry.
Always. We have to savor what we have.
But with the AP system, like it regenerates, and you can, play with as many spells as much as you want. Yeah.
And with once you get all the whole party together, you put this is a big feature. We didn't really go into this super much, but you have 8 characters, but only 4 are out on the screen at one time, and the other 4 are in the back row regenerating AP. So like basically, if you really play your cards right tactically, you can have fresh people in at all times using their strongest moves. Maybe not their ults, because like an ult is like 70% of your AP. But if you're using the more mid-tier abilities, which remain useful throughout the game, you can constantly be using those if you're swapping people out tactically.
Yeah, I appreciate the freedom in doing that and not feeling like restricted. I have to, savor up, all these things in case, we can't use them later when we need them. So I appreciate that.
And it gives you a valid reason to break out of just using the same characters, which is a trap I fall into, admittedly, with a lot of JRPGs. I will have my core team. Usually it's the first 3 or 4 people that I encountered in the story. And then I just stick with them because I learned them already and I don't want to learn somebody else. But there's a couple of things, like the way Quartet is set up, where you initially start out playing through these 4 individual scenarios. So you're getting time with each character, you're getting to know them and how they play, and then you bring them all together. So it's like you put this team together and then you can do the swapping in and out strategically. And so you're really utilizing everybody all the time. So sorry, we're supposed to be asking questions. I'm not supposed to just be gushing about this game.
No, we can keep gushing. I've got at least 10 more minutes.
No, I'm going to be a pro.
We'll gladly gush.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about the musical inspirations, but for the soundtrack. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, I'm hugely influenced by Uematsu, Mitsuda, all the greats from that era. I'm always forgetting the Mystic Quest composer's name. Peter will know.
Ryuji Sasai.
Yeah. Yoko Shimomura. All the greats. But I think one thing that, all of us in the team always talk about is like, I think one thing to make things feel sort of fresh is you just sort of combine things from different areas together in a way that feels novel. So a lot of the music in Quartet, like my training as a composer is actually as a jazz trumpeter and jazz musician. And so a lot of the influence I brought to a lot of pieces is just bringing in some of the great jazz composers, Thad Jones, like some of the music in Alexander's Chapter is just me trying my best to write like Thad Jones. And you don't even have to know who that is, but in the context of the game board, it feels very different and fresh and novel for an RPG. So that was a big influence. And I love JRPGs because I feel as a genre, they have the most tolerance for a diversity of music. I think certain genres can kind of feel limited in the sense of like every song's kind of have to have kind of a similar instrument palette and general style guide that must follow. And I feel like JRPGs is just wide. It's just the Wild West. And because of the structure of Quartet and the stories being so different, it really allowed me to just kind of, Cordelia's Chapter, it's like I'm just doing my best Morricone imitation with all the spaghetti Western tunes. I whistling on tunes and people playing guitars. I had so much fun doing that. Like you have no idea.
Oh, man.
And then in Nikolai's Chapter, it's just a war story. So then I just get to write more like traditional, like sweep it in, snare drum kind of stuff. But so that's I guess my approach. I wrote way too much music for Quartet, and that's only because I'm a stakeholder of the game, so it doesn't cost these guys any money to make me write another track. I just got the OST up on Bandcamp. I was getting it ready, and it's 94 tracks of music. So
94
Wow.
tracks.
There
You
will
hear
no-
that,
no
indie
one will
developers?
ever-
That's how you get a plethora of music for your
Yeah.
game. Just
no one will
Just-
ever listen to that music, but it feels kind of cool that I hit that many tracks. Maybe I'll have to write 6
Man,
more
that's-
before it releases so I can hit 100.
get 100.
It's three,
yeah.
and a-
I mean,
three and a
you
half
gotta-
hours long. That's
Can you do some remixes?
Yeah.
I mean, I would gladly listen to that because I was talking to Branden about it the other day as we were preparing for this, and like I was like, man, the music in this game just it's so good, and I can see that Draz like it. I picked up on that big time. I was like, this just sounds like it's just so well done. So I love it.
Please continue praising me. I love it.
Gladly.
I don't think we-
That's what we're
we
here
talked
for.
about JRPGs, though, right? So we wanted to hear your guys' take. What classifies as a JRPG, and would you consider Quartet a JRPG?
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, so I have like a long, like 5,000 word chapter in my book on Final Fantasy VII,
Yeah.
which I will now read verbatim.
I'm gonna sit back.
But the basic gist of it is like the first chapter is explaining like what happened with RPGs, and the long and short of it, TLDR, is that Dungeons and Dragons, the original RPG, did basically everything that an RPG could do by 1981. There's a little bit that some other RPGs did, but almost every idea that ever existed in an RPG existed first in something written by Gary Gygax or David Arneson. And most of what has come after is just a refinement of those ideas. But the problem, it gives you two problems. One, computers and consoles can't handle all the ideas that are in Dungeons and Dragons. To say nothing of what the Dungeon Master does, who just invents things off the top of his head, right? Makes the world reactive. But the other problem is that, then if you have this huge influence, an influence that doesn't compare to any other art form, you can't. It's hard to be original because Gygax and Arneson already did everything. And so what game RPG creators have, you can hear my 4-year-old in the background again. That's part of the authenticity.
That's
Exactly.
Of the home
Ambience.
office. I put a lot of hats, and I wear a lot of hats for this development, and one of them is dad. But basic idea is that RPG developers responded to the overwhelming influence and technical impossibility of the Dungeons and Dragons by different artistic strategies. And like one of them results in action RPGs. Let's take RPGs and fuse them with something else. And one of them is like, what Skyrim and The Witcher and more recently Baldur's Gate 3 did, which is let's do as much of D&D as we can. Obviously, there's going to be some holes in it, but we're going to try and cover as much of D&D material as we can in our game. And then we'll largely simplify what's there, right? Because computers can't handle it. There's no dungeon master. We don't have AGI to be the DM. So that's what we need to do right now is do as much as we can of D&D, but simplify. And those are simplifications. But then what JRPGs is this third strategy, which I call specialization, which is just like, let's just take a small slice of D&D and focus on that and drop a lot of the other stuff. So like what JRPGs became, especially by the time of Final Fantasy VI, is they sliced away party composition. It's not that important in Final Fantasy VI. You could bring any 4 characters and beat Kefka, no problem. And narrative choices also largely gone, because what they wanted to pursue was a story like a dramatic cinematic story that you play through with characters who are who they are, who have real arcs. And you can't really have an arc for characters who have a lot of choices. You can, but it's just a different sort of art form, and that's not the one they were going for, and also not something that Super Nintendo cartridge can handle. And so that specialization strategy of let's slice away everything that's not of the D&D model that's not core to our vision is what JRPGs became. But also that's how we get roguelikes, which slice away all the story aspects, right? It's how you get Pokemon. Pokemon essentially slices away everything that's not character classes. Pokemon is just 150 character classes. And then you build a party entirely based on the difference between Rapidash and other fire Pokemon are totally eluding me. Charizard. There's not that huge a difference. It's like it's a much smaller difference than there is between the Knight and the Paladin, for example. But that's what Pokemon is about. It's just about party composition and that kind of combat. So in the world of specializations, JRPGs, or at least for a time, probably I would say 1990 through 2012, were these hyper-focused, linear, authorial games that pushed a lot of the optional open world exploration to the end of the game. They kept it. They just pushed it all to the end of the game when you get an airship and like Disc 3 of Final Fantasy 7 or World of Ruin in Final Fantasy 6. We're going to move all that optional exploration stuff to the end after the plot has largely resolved. And that was for a good, like I said, a good 22 years. What JRPGs probably were, and then since then, of course, things have evolved because they always do. Mm-hmm. But that's where we're working from.
That's one of the best ways I've heard that argument put. Yeah. I've always kind of felt the same way. Doing what I do and what we do on YouTube involves a lot of people yelling at us that a game can't be a JRPG if it's not made in Japan. And it's like, I don't know how you explain Final Fantasy IX, which was made in Hawaii, but it's refreshing, and I'm just gonna grab that clip and just play that. I'm just gonna send that to people.
It's just also like
whenever I get that argument,
he's just saying, I'm gonna order some Chinese food. It's not Chinese food. It wasn't made in China. It was made by Laotians in New York. But it's fine. Who cares? It's like it's a style. It's good. Right? We know what we're getting.
Exactly. Like we've said before. It's the vibe. Like at the end of the day, it's like you're playing a game that has a certain type of aesthetic, a certain type of feel to it, and that's the JRPG feel because that's like what we've been groomed to like understand since the beginning. Is like that's how like you have these very narrative focused games that do slice away that piece of the original D&D Ultima kind of perspective that from the PC gaming period and for pen and paper like D&D stuff like that. So like the Japanese loved that at the time. And for them, they kind of focused in on their own little niche of a way of how do they turn that into a game on the Famicom, SNES and things like that. So like that's exactly like you hit the nail on the head with that. That's a good way to describe that.
My last note is it's what I have to say is not that insightful. It's really not that insightful. So you should just go.
No, go ahead.
Genres are just about expectations, right?
Exactly.
Right. It's like what do fans of the genre expect? Yeah. And even though that evolves, we call our boomer JRPG, which I very few baby boomers. Actually, my dad's friend. One time when I was in like 7th grade, my dad's adult male friend who was in his 30s in 1998 called me on the phone. It was like he would call my dad and it was because we had landlines back then, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and asked me, "Hey, how do I breed a gold chocobo?" And I was like, "Well, Dave, I'm glad you called." So here I am explaining to my dad's friend of how to operate a JRPG. But so there was one official boomer who played JRPGs, but our boomer JRPG, which we might have called Golden Age, but that sounds like it denigrates other JRPGs. The set of expectations you should have about it is that what old guys played in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like there's a difference between what we think of JRPG is like when you play a Trails game. Like that's not what JRPGs were back then.
Yeah,
it's a very different aesthetic, very different. Like it's gotten more like I guess like you think of it as more anime. So that's why they give it that whole like Japanese idea of like it has to be made in Japan, it has to be made by Japanese people. It's anime, and I'm like, no, like that's not always what JRPGs were. It's an evolution of what JRPGs could be. It's like a piece of what JRPGs can like. Even in the current state, like not all like Octopath Traveler is not very anime. Like
look at the H2 stuff.
Like
Octopath.
It has to have a Hot Springs episode to be.
It's gotta be. We've all a poser. You're an anime poser.
Unless you're going to the hot spring or you have a beach episode, you're not doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
Beach episode,
you're not doing it right.
Would qualify as well. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have a beach vacation episode.
We got 9 days to put one in our game. Get on it, Pete.
Guys, hurry up or else you're not a JRPG.
So actually, spoiler, but there is a scene where the hippo, Juna, actually she's Eurofant, our fantasy creature, but let's be honest, everyone sees her as a hippo. Sure. And she is in a hot spring. And if you do all of the optional quests, there's one of them that has her in a hot spring. So,
yes,
we lose rejoice.
It qualifies. Perfect. There you go. So officially, stamp of approval.
One thing about the JRPG thing I always found interesting is about what Pat was saying is in the 90s they were called console RPGs because the real divergence was really between computer and console RPGs. Mm-hmm. And probably because, obviously consoles just couldn't have the space to do what computers could do. So Pat suggested they had to sort of specialize and pick and choose the things they wanted to focus on. And then when did the term JRPG happen? Like in 2010, 2012? It was kind of recent.
So I actually did a research project on this for my books, and I'm gonna try and really TLDR this one, because even though the last explanation was kind of long, that actually was a short version. But the first example of that anyone could find is 1996, and it was like somebody reanalyzing the J-pop. We had J-pop music, right, which came from the 80s. So someone said JRPG, and then the first serious, I remember saying JRPG with friends, but this first serious print example of it I can think of was, in fact, Jerry Holkins in 2006. And then Final Fantasy 13 then attracted some actual serious print review JRPGs. And then the real sort of watershed moment where it came into print everywhere was the re-release of Final Fantasy 7 on Steam in 2012. And then all of a sudden the word JRPG was everywhere, and it was a genre marker pretty much universally.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember
that
it
was not as old as it felt like it should be, but to hear it was that recent is surprising.
Yeah, because I don't remember using it like as a kid when I talked about.
I just said
like,
RPG.
Yeah, I went back and looked like EGM and
like
Game
that.
Pro, and they didn't. They just said RPG. I literally went through all these archive issues where let's look at all the reviews of Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and it was just RPG. And then 2006 was the first time I saw a serious print publication of JRPG.
Interesting.
2006.
Well, we talked about how Quartet, has similarities to all these inspirations you've had in classic JRPGs, but we were interested in a little bit more about what differentiates Quartet from other, indie JRPGs that are, recently coming out or have been out, maybe such as your Shadows of Adam that came out prior to Quartet.
Yeah, so I could briefly talk about how it's different from SOA. Shadows of Adam was very heavily influenced by Mystic Quest, and in general, the scope of that game was a little smaller. It was made in about half the time that we made Quartet in. And when we finished Shadows of Adam in 2017, that's about when I started getting in contact with Patrick. We talked about want to do another game, and we just looked at Shadows of Adam and said, okay, what were all the pain points that we see in reviews that people had problems with? Let's write that down, but let's also look at all the things that worked well. So the AP system, for instance, was something we took from SOA to Quartet. It was like, oh, this works. Let's just put it in the next game. Why not? Trails games are like famous for getting the mechanic to the next game and then evolving it slightly. But as far as against other indie RPGs, it's hard to say. I mean, I really feel like when I played Chained Echoes, I remember really liking it. And then I remember it's like, this is a different kind of JRPG. Like it just felt like it really embraced, even though it looks, it's a pixel art game. So like, and it has like Chrono Trigger presentation in the battle system, but like mechanically, in my opinion, and just structurally, it felt very much influenced by like that generation that started kind of in like the Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Like, you know what I mean? And that's not me dunking on them. I love Chained Echoes. I think it's a great game, but I remember seeing that like, these new like design trends are really like becoming the new sort of expectation of the genre. And so I guess Quartet's just different because it's just not taking as much from those sort of second decade 2000s games as much.
More recent, yeah.
Yeah, and like when I say all this stuff, like, oh, Quartet doesn't do this, it's not like a value judgment. It's never like, oh, because it sucks.
Yeah,
it's just like, we just had an idea.
Variety, right, in our games.
Yeah.
What's that, Emily? I'm sorry.
You want variety in our games, so I think it's always good to do something a little bit different.
Yeah,
and Indie's the best at that, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
So we take risk, and hopefully it pays off. People might play Quartet, and we've talked about this a lot. Like, man might play and be like, "Huh, this combat, like this battle didn't go very long. This is really easy." Or like, I got to the town and I want to do side quests, and that just might not be for someone, and that's okay. I think one thing that's cool about JRPGs, maybe Peter can speak about this because he's actually the bona fide JRPG expert probably in the universe. He owns every game ever made. But there's a lot of variety even within a genre that's very highly specialized. There's a lot of variety.
Yeah, for sure. Peter, give us your thoughts on all that.
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of hinted at earlier, right? Indies are, what makes indies great is like they are not trying to focus on like, we want to make sure this game maximizes success. It's a lot about creators making the game that they want to make and what they feel strongly about. And like we have friends who worked on some amazing games. Geomythica is like, what if Final Fantasy VII Remake was a Nintendo game, right? Like we have, folks at Chain Dago's 8-Bit Adventures too. We're friends with all of them. Insert shameless plug for Infinite Alliance, right? Which is the big crossover game with all of our friends it's like, I love indies. I buy as many of them as I can and kickstart as many as I can. And I'm involved with a few. That's how I got on the project. I was a Shadows of Adam backer, and I was just nosy on the Discord. We all wanted to create games, and so we did. And it's like everybody brings their own thing to the table, and that's what makes indies great. And it's hard to compare them to each other because everybody has a different vision.
Mm-hmm. Well, since we're, kind of already talking about what went into, the pieces that made up this game, tell us a little bit about the development process. Like, I've heard somewhere, and I don't know if it was Abdallah that mentioned it or if I read it somewhere, that like the concept was, the core concept was like, we need to design a game for people that have full-time jobs and don't have a billion hours to commit to a game. So maybe starting with that, tell us about like the design of this thing. Like, where did it come from?
Yeah, so the first game, Shadows of Adam, that was the tagline. Well, there were sort of two taglines. The first one was simple, well done. And then the second was a JRPG for people with jobs. And that pitch really worked. I got to credit Pat for coming up with that at a MagFest. So that was definitely a design decision. What if we could make a game that had like a bite-sized chunk of like the JRPG experience, but didn't take 40, 50 hours? Quartet is similar in that ethos, but just a little more expanded. But I would say just conceptually, Quartet just kind of started with like a couple tentpole ideas when me and Pat were first brainstorming the game. The first one was we want to have a large cast of characters. So Shadows of Adam had 4. We're going to have 8. Okay, if we have 8 characters, when you're all together, let's allow you to swap between them. So those are 2 big points. And then the third big decision was we want to tell the opening chapters non-linearly, like a Wild Arms 3 or Dragon Quest 4. This was before Octopath had actually come out too. I remember when Octopath was announced, I was heartbroken. I was like, oh my God. I was like, everyone's going to say we copied this. And then I played Octopath and it was a great game, but it was way different than what we wanted to do.
Way different.
Because Octopath is like kind of 8 vignettes. Quartet's a story that's just told non-linearly in the beginning.
Also, we didn't think it was going to take. We thought we were going to come out like relatively soon after Octopath, and the Octopath sequel came out, and then 2 years passed after that, and then we came out. So that's the indie struggle.
You guys were working on Quartet for 2 years before I joined, like to do any of the programming. So like massive amounts of pre-production, right?
Yes, which helped, but it was a journey.
Yeah, we had no money. That's the problem. When it's hard to make games when you have no money. So that was, but the pre-production definitely helped because we really got like central vision tentpoles. And, for better or worse, the vision for the game has never really changed from development. One thing I always talk about, and people probably are that know me are sick of me saying this, is I'm a firm believer it's like you get your vision for your game and every decision as you're making the game is in service of that vision. Like, obviously, you can tweak the vision around the edges, and you spend a long time really thinking about that vision and what you want your game to be experienced as from a player's perspective. But I think a lot of times it's very easy, especially in the grind that is developing JRPGs, which is very content-rich and very bespoke. Like, every content slice is very bespoke. It's very easy to play over and over. Like, when we test our chapters, we probably play them 30, 40, 50 times in a row to get a cutscene time right, to get this battle feeling right, to get the collisions right. And it's very easy to be like, man, this is boring. I'm on play 23 and this isn't exciting me anymore. But it's like, I'm the developer. The game isn't making the game. The game is like what the players experience. And they don't have all the information we do. This is never going to keep feeling fresh and exciting. Though I will say, because we work on chapter 10 and test that a lot. And then you go to chapter 11 side quests. Like in the last few weeks, 2 to 4 weeks ago, I just played through Quartet linearly. That was like the first time I did it. Like in that sense, like from this to this to this. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a real game. And I know Pat had a similar experience too. It's kind of crazy.
I only played the game, like I played every chapter hundreds of times. But then I only played the game front to back linearly this past Friday.
Wow.
That's just what game development is like. Because again, I had played hundreds of times every chapter. And then, but playing the whole thing in linear order was kind of a treat. I was like, oh, we did it. We should, not like this is amazing, but that's for the world to decide. Yeah. But just like the vision that we were trying to accomplish, we accomplished. So at least we have that.
you always say like you have the vision and you stick to that and you don't get distracted or get worried if you're getting bored with your project, because a lot of times you can iterate yourself into death cycles. Like you play it the 20th time and all of a sudden, you know what, this isn't really happening. We got to redo this. You redo that takes 6 months to redo. And then you play it another 20 times and you're bored with it again. And thus the cycle continues and continues. Luckily, we never fell into that. Now, the downside is we made the game we wanted to make. That doesn't mean the game isn't bad. It could just suck. So, that's for players to decide. I don't think it sucks, but like, that's the risk. Like I always say, I would say this, like George Lucas had a vision for the Phantom Menace. Doesn't mean it was a good movie. Now, I don't think we're the Phantom Menace, but I mean, I would like to make Phantom Menace money. So. Holy smokes!
Sure. Yeah, as I say,
I mean, yeah,
I will turn over schlock anytime to make $100 million.
Can you turn Juna into like a Jar Jar Binks character?
I was gonna say that. Yeah. Like, can you just like slip Jar Jar Binks?
She'll just freestyle rap all of her dialogue.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
there we go.
That'll go well.
I'm here for that. Yeah.
I'm ready.
Yeah. So, but no, we got the boomer JRPG aesthetic. We did it. So that's your thing, then. Yeah. Buy this game.
In terms of like your vision, so you had like these like tent poles that you said you had. Is there any like major, like let's say, I wouldn't say major, but like any tent poles that you had that might have shifted or changed as you got further, as you played these one chapters like hundreds of times? Like, is there any like glaring ones that like were interesting to you that you were just like, maybe not?
I know, Pat, you toned down some of the chapters, like the first playthrough. It wasn't like 10, 20 times in. It was very early.
Yeah, I mean, so like Tyler killed some of my more pretentious ideas right away, which is good. Like originally, Alexandra was actually all of her battles were gonna be card battles. Like it was gonna be like an RPG battle system, but you would only play with cards versus cards. And then like later on she would become like a normal combatant when certain story events would propel her that you've played it, you've seen what happens, and so she's just a shop girl when the game begins. So it's like, well, if she's just a shop girl, we should represent that, and then that got killed, and that was for the best. That was absolutely 100,000% for the best. So there were some pretty pretentious things that I was trying to do in 2017, and then we toned those down a little bit. But towards the end of the game, I was able to bring a little bit of that flair back in some of the optional quests. Nice. So I got a little bit of extra leash right at the end of development.
Tyler allowed it.
As the person on the hook for implementing most of the minigame features, I actually enjoyed it. So thank you for putting that stuff back in.
Yeah, there was the classic triangle is I say, how about this idea? Tyler says, no. And Pete goes, well, it would be easy. And that's how a minigame gets approved.
I like it.
Oh, man.
Any other big challenges outside of funding that you guys maybe have fun stories about?
Yeah, funding's the big thing. I mean, when we did our Kickstarter for both Shadows of Adam and Quartet, like, honest to God, all that money went to development. And I wouldn't say it was like make or break. I think we were so determined to get it done, we would have found a way somehow to buy all the art we needed. But that was definitely the big one. And just as I kind of mentioned earlier, like just JRPGs and specifically are just so content rich, and there's just so much bespoke content. I remember Peter once joked, he's like, how hard can making a JRPG be? It's just a bunch of menus. But it's like, that's a doused in understatement. Yeah, I would say because content's so bespoke, like it feels like every time you get to the next set piece or slice of gameplay, there's just like, okay, we did all this stuff over here and we can't use any of that. We have to make this new, like every cutscene Pat made, he wrote the script, but he also made the cutscene. Like he animated the sprites, he moved the message boxes around and stuff. Like that's bespoke. You have to work on that. We have tools to make that easier, but even within like chapter 9, 10, 11, we were still asking Peter to make us new tools to do new things. So I would say that's the biggest challenge. I mean, in a perfect world, I wouldn't have spent 7 years on this game. But, also we have children, we have families, we have day jobs. None of us, well, Patrick's a full-time game developer now. But Peter is a full-time programmer and I do music full-time. So, we don't do the game full-time. And so that's just the hard part. Money and time, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody was full-time in this on the Quartet. Not at all.
Yeah. And then that's it's a feat of like, you guys did a great thing. And the fact that it's almost out, and going through that like part time, even that's a pat on the back right there.
How do you guys feel about like the difference between like a small kind of intimate team like you have now versus a larger team? Like, would you welcome the addition of more people, assuming that funding was there, obviously, to make that development? Would that make the development process smoother, or like, what do you think? Like,
yeah, I mean, as long as they're juniors, like if we had more vision holders, we would have had a problem. Because I've been having been on projects where there's a lot of vision holders, that gets murky and that gets to be a problem. So like
in the kitchen.
If you say hierarchy is good and not everybody should have the equal voice, that sounds like evil. Like that's not who Mr. Rogers wants you to be. But it is what gets games out the door. Yeah. Sadly. So having seen the chaos in the many projects I've contracted on, when the creative vision is held in different ways by different people. That ends up being a problem. But having like someone who can go in and create all the NPC movement scripts and fix all the tile errors and clean up all the little like variable errors for state management, having that kind of person around would have been unimaginably great. It would have been terrific. So having like a junior, mid-level or junior person being able to be there would be absolutely terrific. But having another stakeholder probably would have diluted the vision.
Yeah.
Another question we had regarding the development process was how you guys kind of approached tackling controversial subjects, because there are quite a few in Quartet here.
Yeah. So they Tyler read the script and he's like, "Are we really going to do this?" And I was like, "I mean, it's a fan, sort of the defense, and like I don't want to spoil too much, but like when you get to the sections where crazy things happen, I will remind everyone that something very much like that, minus the magic, really did happen, right? Like this is a story about something very similar to World War II. And if you take away the magic, almost all the other parts are more or less a version of what actually happened. Right. So it's like, are we inventing something awful or cruel? No, because again, we're just representing the human condition and adding, because we're a JRPG, we add magic. That's what JRPGs are. Take something like, take a theme, right? Like Final Fantasy VII is just like adding magic to, like the succession of generations. Like what happens to people when the world that defined them and gave them identity goes away? And then how do we use magic to express that dynamic, right? That's what the theme is. Or Final Fantasy VIII is like, is it possible to truly be alone in life? That's the dramatic question of Final Fantasy VIII. And then they use a sorceress who has time compression to be the villain that embodies that concept. Quartet is just doing that. But there were definitely some moments where Tyler read the script and was like, "Are we?" And then, but there were times he let me cook, and sometimes where he reined me in, and he did a very graceful job on both of those things, and that's probably why the product came out the way it did.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, like, there's no like lewd language or sexuality or sexual content or anything like that. But I think what Emily maybe was referring to is maybe stuff that happens in like Nikolai's chapter if you played the demo.
Sure.
And like Pat said, like I think so. I write music for an army band, and I went to basic training last year. And when I got out of basic training and then replayed Nikolai's chapter, one thing I really appreciate about Pat's style is like, these just sound like the drill sergeants I went to basic training with. And to kind of go at Pat's point, like these are things that actually happen. Like he just would like go on the internet and just look up people telling stories about their drill sergeants. And I always found that like makes the characters feel really real. Like in Ben's chapter, they're just all like, I'm sure y'all picked this up, but it's basically JRPG Greece, right? Ben's just a Greek guy.
Yeah.
He's every Greek diner owner that I ever worked for when I was a child in Philadelphia. There were a few of them. So a lot of it's just verbatim quotes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of affection. I think once you get to the game, you'll be like, okay, there's a lot of affection here. It's not like a criticism. Ben was probably my favorite character to write. Because I had a lot of bosses, and I sometimes would just quote them. I also just sometimes verbatim quoted historical figures. And when you get to those scenes, you're like, this is probably this person. You're like, yeah, that's actually a verbatim quote. But when you add magic and make have RPG battles, all of a sudden it becomes a new thing. Like you don't have to change that much to change a lot sometimes.
That's interesting.
That's fun. Well, you guys had a very successful Kickstarter, so we wanted to hear a little bit more about marketing for Quartet and how that's been going.
Yeah.
Like how much did Kickstarter help, or Indie Quest that was last May? I'd love to hear some stories regarding that.
Yeah, IndieQuest was huge. So I'm really grateful for Taylor for doing that. I thought the presentation of it, just the whole collaborative spirit of it was just really amazing. That was kind of like a little bit of a watershed for us. We had Shadows of Adam, and that was like a decently received game. A couple folks knew it, so that helped us get a higher base floor when we started our Quartet Kickstarter. And our core Kickstarter was, like I mentioned earlier, that was to get money to make the game. It was not a marketing ploy. It was not to get enough money to show a publisher that there's interest in the game. Like every cent we got for that Kickstarter was used to make the game, and we needed that money. But yeah, for marketing, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to know. I mean, that's another thing, like Pat had mentioned about having juniors. Like, I would have loved to have like a real bona fide expert in social media management and marketing. I think even those two things aren't quite the same. But basically, what I do is I just get up in the morning and I look through a folder that has like 50 screenshots, and I pick one and I put it on Twitter and Bluesky. And then we hope that people like it. And then I just make mental notes of what people click. And then that's sort of it. We just basically been doing that for 5-6 years, slowly building wish lists. And then when IndieQuest came out, that was like I mentioned, a watershed. Like, I felt like since that point, there's been a lot of momentum.
Okay.
So I'm really thankful for Taylor for giving us a shot.
Marketing
you
was
also
a struggle.
had a demo too, right?
Yeah,
Did
I
that
think
help gain traction.
Yeah, that's a great point, Emily. Yeah, I remember. I think, was it like a month after IndieQuest or a few weeks after Next Fest happened on Steam, and we were like, we should get a demo and put up, I think, Nikolai's chapter, and then we put that up, and that got a lot of good feedback and attention. It definitely helped the wish list too, and then obviously put up another trailer and stuff like that. But I'm not. I mean, a lot of marketing is sadly just sort of pay to win. Like, more money gets you more chances to be seen. It's just the way it is. And if anyone is like wants to be my sugar daddy and drop a couple mil for a marketing campaign, I'll take it. But no, that's all I got to say on marketing. Y'all have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it was a struggle for us. We had stakeholders who knew how to do a lot of really incredible things. One thing, like, we see a lot in like the JRPG subreddit of like, why didn't such and such game do X? And like, we know a lot of those creators, and it's like, oh, they didn't have a guy who could do it. Not like they didn't do it, but like they didn't have a guy whose job it was before becoming a game dev who could do it. Whereas like Pete could program a lot of things that even the most dedicated RPG Maker user could never do. And so like that's a real reason. But like, the one thing we never really had was a marketing guy. So it was always a struggle. We knew one person who could guide us a little bit, but we didn't want to overuse them because he was giving us a bunch of favors, right? And you don't want to alienate somebody by, you're like, oh, can you just continually give me all your marketing knowledge every day forever? It's a small industry, and you don't want to tax any relationships that way. Yeah. So marketing was, I would say, our biggest struggle. Although we made some progress there, but getting the word out has been difficult.
Yeah, getting the first Steam demo up, I think that helped a bit. Like, we saw these kind of little step functions and like the number of wish lists, and really, like, as an indie, like, there's very few metrics you can look at. You could look at like how many people are in your Discord, how many people follow you on social media. But the big one, because it directly affects sales, is how many wish lists do you have. And so we were just tracking that. So the first, I feel like the first big kind of constant uptick was when we posted the Archives demo, and that was a few years ago. And then right around the IndieQuest with the second demo, we started saying like, oh, it went up to double digits every day, right? Like, so, and every once in a while we would get like a big streamer or something would post and give us a shout out, and we'd see like a little bump. But it would always kind of go back down to where the baseline was. So in this last month before launch, we've just seen like a more steady increase. And, is it because the algorithms like us because we're coming as just more natural organic press? Like, I don't know. We're not marketing people.
I think it helps that you guys have like a date that this game is actually coming out. So more people are interested, because you hear about, a lot of indies that are stuck in development hell, if you will. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a trust issue sometimes. Like, do I want to commit and see if this game's actually going to come out or not? So
on that point, I'd be curious, point the questions at the host. I've just something I've been thinking a lot about. I feel like we're currently in a cycle of like Kickstarters really popping off, And do y'all have a sense as consumers and people who are really in touch with this niche of like, do you think like I remember like 10 years ago, Kickstarters like didn't do anything. Like no one trusted Kickstarters. And then the last 4 years, like everyone is like really big, blows up a lot. Do y'all get a sense of if that's going to cycle at all?
I think we're almost in a downturn a little bit right now.
Yeah.
Because there's been some canceled games.
There's been a lot of
because
canceled games.
The high profile like issues, right?
Yeah.
Like what's his name?
What was that one game?
Shadow Hearts creator. His game kind of doing this massive Kickstarter, and then years later they're like, we don't have any money. We could get a publisher, you know.
Sadly, we had to stop. Yeah.
So I'm afraid that we might be in a situation where we're going to see a downturn because of some broken trust. I hope it doesn't affect the smaller indie space, because so much good stuff has come out from that. And I think the goals for the smaller indie, they're not going to be as
they're more attainable,
crazy high as some of those bigger ones that have failed. But
I think
I don't know.
When we see Armed Fantasia and Penny Blood, what happens with them? Because that was a very big Kickstarter that everyone thought was going to happen, but they still haven't found a publisher.
Seems like a sure thing.
Publisher money's really dry right now. There was like a big surge, I think, around 2020, 2021, and I think it's kind of slim picking. So I really do feel for those developers. I was just kind of curious because I figured y'all might have a better sense of that. And to what I think Branden was saying, I hope that it doesn't affect the indies, because like we're really being a part of this incredibly niche space of independent developers who make JRPG style games. We know kind of all the other developers. We know Josh Halloran and Chris Ewan and Eddie from Chain Echoes, and we talk to them, and like we know for a fact that when they do these Kickstarters, like they need that $40,000. Like we know.
No, exactly.
Like it's kind of make or break. So
yeah, and I think it's like for like I guess people like, within your vein of things who have already kind of released games and are like have a following of people who understand that, like, hey, like when you put you're actually going to like come through with it. I think there's more like you have some sort of track record to all of this. So like I think that's going to be easier for like indie devs like from that, but like blossoming new indie devs that are coming in might struggle a little bit, I think, in this next downturn of like just trustworthiness and things like that. So like that's just going to be, I think, the difficult aspect of just how do you market it and how do you like be upfront with your Kickstarters or people who are looking into help fund, and being like very open and communicative. Because I feel like sometimes you get that like some situations where you don't get as much communication on a regular basis that keeps people like a little upfront to wanting to really keep pursuing exactly support and stuff like that. So like you see that a lot, so it's like you don't want to burn those kind of bridges in that perspective, which I don't think is a problem for you guys.
You talked a little bit during talking about marketing and developing the game, like how you have some of you have full-time jobs still on top of development. Like what's balancing that like how many hours a week are you able to dedicate to game development versus and I think about it from my little corner of the internet, making videos and stuff and podcasts for YouTube, and I'm like, that takes so much time. I can't I can't imagine trying to make a video game with the same number of days, I'm pretty sure, same number of hours in a day that I have. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah,
sure. Go ahead, Tyler.
So I just have a really fond story. This is right around when Peter had joined with us, and that's when the development really started. I was like, oh man, we got Peter here. This is going to happen. This guy's a genius. And I remember when we were getting ready for our Kickstarter demo and a campaign, this was in 2020, so we're all locked down. I think we had all of us had recently had younger children. And I just have this like fond memory of like holding my son until like 2 a.m, putting him down, and then getting on the Discord call and just jamming out. So essentially, like, the time we spent making the game was just the time we weren't doing our other more higher priority things that we needed to do as fathers or our jobs or whatever. So for me personally, I can only speak to myself. Like a lot of my development time was just spent after I get my kids to bed, maybe watch an episode of Home Improvement with the wife, and then okay, see you later. I'm gonna go work on Quartet, and then maybe lose a little sleep because of that. So I because release is soon, and we're like pretty locked down on our build and feel good about it. I've been like taking the last few days just like oh, let's go to the pool and like hang out with my kids, and like let me go to Dairy Queen with my kids and just like not worry about working on Quartet.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, a lot of just like me working after
Treat
hours.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to vary also depending on like what your role in the project is. So as the programmer, a lot of my time is spent like building tech, and then that Pat and Tyler will use to make all of the stuff. And so like I can be very bursty, and so like I can burn a whole weekend on a thing and then be doing nothing for like 2 weeks, and that's very compatible with having a day job. Whereas like if you're like the content mill, right? If you're writing cutscenes like Pat does, like you just gotta get those hours in wherever you can, and it's a lot. I feel like it's a lot harder to do that.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that made it possible for me was I work. I'm an independent contractor for working on other people's games, and so I could just I only get paid by the item or by the hour, so I could just take time and say, okay, I'm not going to work for money at this time, and I'm going to work on Quartet instead. And like there was like a time where I had something more or less like severance from a job, and I was able to do. Not full time work on Quartet, but like majority work on Quartet for about 2 months, but while just doing a little bit of client work. And that's like when Ben's chapter, like that, that big flashback in Ben's chapter, the interactive flashback, that took one of those whole months just to do that. So like that's like, okay, well, if I had not had been able to work 80% full time on Quartet for that 1 month, then that chapter probably would have been really different. And the flashback would have been lower scope. And maybe that would have been the smart thing. I'm not sure. But, essentially I was just accepting less pay. But also I think I was, in sort of the winds of history were behind me from 2021 through 2024 in that so many game productions were just flush with cash because there was this huge bubble. Where the industry was like, oh, everyone's trapped inside playing video games. Let's just throw millions of dollars at people who have never made a game. But then those people will be like, well, I've read your book about Chrono Trigger. Can you help me on this project? And so I was able to command more flexible hours and higher wages for that historical period. And that was something totally beyond my control, but nevertheless, it was very helpful. And that kept me afloat in order to be able to both make a living and make an enormous amount of content for that 4-year period.
Yeah, what we're saying is, if anyone's listening, I'm saying this with tongue half in cheek. Making JRPGs is really hard, and you probably shouldn't do it.
It really has to be your vocation, right? Like it really does.
I know it sounds corny to say like you gotta love it because there's a lot of parts of game development that are just frankly kind of a slog and aren't fun. But the joy of the development is like just hearing other people experience playing the game or even watching them. That's just fills me with so much joy until a bug happens and then I melt down completely and just go into my room into a fetal position.
Yeah, this is a good sort of a metonym of what game development is like. The big, I think only Branden has seen it, but the big scene in chapter 10 with the lots of no spoilers fireworks. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Those both have seen the scene where the bad thing happens and the scene where the good thing happens. Each one of those took 10 days by itself. So yeah, that's like, like you just get an idea of like what level of investment and time those things take. And then that's why it took 7.5 years, because again, we were all having to earn our money at a day job and then, occasionally make a 10-day long scene that lasts 90 seconds, but it looks good, right? You got to have high points in your game. You really do. So don't compromise on the high points. If you're going to make the bad decision to make JRPGs, you really commit to the absolute total inefficiency of making content and just make it until it's as good as it needs to be. Because there's either don't make JRPGs or go all out. The middle ground is probably not. Aristotle would curse me for this, but the middle ground is probably not viable in this genre.
Yeah, I'm like the king of
the half
like
measure approach, right?
Yeah, I'm the king of like, oh, this is like a little shop area that you're only going to experience for 1 minute. Let me write a 6-minute tune and spend $1,000 on musicians. Like I'm the king of that. It's very wasteful. Like I think if like you had like a corporate person, they'd be like, this is terrible ROI. This is not efficient use. That's why I think my working theory of why so many games build so much like fluffy content off like little slices of graphics and and areas of the gameplay is because it's cheap and it adds a lot of time to the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making like that scene that Pat talked about in chapter 10, if you put that to any like finance person, they would say, no, we're never going to spend this much money. We're not going to hire, or spend all these hours and hire a choir to sing or whatever. So anyway.
But you know the meme of when Kermit is talking to himself in the mirror, and the other Kermit has like a dark hood.
Yeah.
Kermit.
That's JRPG. Should I make this incredible scene and add all these like layers that fade in and out and do all this like cool subjective experience of the game, or should I work for this client who asked me to finish something for a deadline? And Dark Kermit wins sometimes.
Well, we got to thank Dark Kermit for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Quartet comes out August 26th. So it's almost here.
Almost here.
We're all very
Almost
excited
here.
for the full release.
Exactly.
And we just want to know what's next. Do you guys have maybe DLC plans? Maybe a physical if sales do well?
Physical?
We can't comment on physical stuff yet.
Okay.
There is a DLC that was promised in the Kickstarter. So Tournament of Heroes, that will come out probably after the Switch release. So we already got the content's basically already planned, but we're gonna do a Switch release and PlayStation. So that looks to be 3 or 4 months away from the Steam release or PC release. We're actually on Good Old Games and probably Epic Store. Peter can send the sniper to take me out if I'm promising things that are.
I mean, we've told people that we're going to be there, and we have an account, and we're started setting it up. So unless something crazy happens, and like,
Fortnite willing, will be on Epic Store, and so 3 or 4 months after the PC release, we should be on the consoles, and then a little bit after that, we'll probably release the DLC. And we're committed to that. I would like to do more. There's more I'd like to do, but we're going to have to just make a business decision about that. And in the more immediate future, I probably will have a week of anxiety dreams.
Wait, you haven't had them?
Right on tap for me.
I've had them for a month.
I had one last night.
That was? Because I've been just sleeping like crap the last.
I have a stream. I'm back in high school. I haven't been working on a project. I haven't finished my math project, and I'm not going to graduate. And I'm like, and then I wake up. Wait a second, I'm 39. And then I wake up. But I have that every night now as this release is impending.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
We'll do DLC console releases, and I know physical is really important to y'all, especially you, Emily. I know it's a big subject you talk about a lot, and we agree. If the corporate gave me the sheet of paper, we would just say, "Oh, we can't comment on it at this time." So read between the lines.
Fair enough.
Yep. Fair enough.
Fair enough.
I'll probably I'm trying to get to a zen place. I feel really confident about the game and the build stats, so I'm feeling good, and I'm just gonna try to get to launch and just be in the moment and enjoy it, and whatever fires we got to put out, we'll put out, and then hopefully get a little bit of relaxation. I'm craving for every night after 8 I've worked on Quartet for 6-7 years. It'd be fun if I played GoldenEye 64 or something, or actually played another JRPG.
Yeah.
There's other stuff going on after 8. Turns out, you can do other stuff.
Yeah, there's going to be a giant hole in my life too. Actually, the
dopamine crash is going to be hard, probably.
Yeah,
there's going to be a sense of void there.
Unless the game sells really well, and then I promised that at 100,000 sales, I would tattoo a picture of Juno on my shoulder, and then so there's a goal there. No, please don't.
That's further incentive. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, we're supremely confident in the game. It is absolutely the game we wanted to make. Yeah. But when you don't have a marketing team to do analysis, you don't know what's going to happen next.
That's right.
Right.
Well, I'm excited to hear it's at least on GOG, as well as Steam, and then consoles coming soon. And I'm sure a lot of our audience are very much looking forward to playing it. Any last notes, I guess, before we end here today?
I'll just say play the demo if you're really curious about what it's like.
Definitely play the demo.
90-minute demo on Steam right now.
Yeah,
Perfect.
You'll get a real good sense of what the game is like and the feel of the story itself.
All the vibes.
And it's I think everyone will enjoy that. So go out there, download the demo, wishlist if you have it, and pick it up when it's out. Yeah.
All right. Well,
I
that
think
feels
this
like
was
feels like a wrap it up silence. I like that.
Yeah.
Wait, we can wind Pat up. He can go on another like lecture about game design.
Yeah, I mean, I only talked about.
Can
one
you
of my
read us a
books.
chapter?
Yeah,
Just like just a random
here we go.
chapter. Yeah.
I got one of my books right here.
perfect.
Oh, nice.
Page 71. No.
Well, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate
Yeah,
having you on. You taking the time, and like I said, I'm being a pro interviewer here, and I'm not just going to like say how much I enjoy what I've played of the game. I won't say that at all. I won't say how much I have just been in love with the experience of what I've played so far.
Read between the lines there.
You won't hear that from me. Read
Yeah.
between the lines, yeah. But yeah, we're really excited for you guys and for you out there listening or watching. If you haven't played the demo, if you haven't checked it out, do so. I would say do so. If you are the audience for this show, you are probably the audience for this game. So highly recommend you go check that out ASAP if you don't mind. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, thanks
We're
again.
not forcing you, but we're kind of forcing you.
That's an order.
It's an order.
There'll be a quiz on the next podcast.
It's
Exactly.
a suggestion. It's just a suggestion.
Yeah. Just
Strongly
a very
worded
strong
suggestion.
one. Yes.
Sure.
Well, we really enjoyed having you guys here with us today. And thanks everyone for listening to today's awesome episode. And I guess we'll all see you next week.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Just to see our game, that's for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. All right. Take
That
care.
was fun. Yeah.
Take care, everyone.